to this week's episode of the Lawcast. This week we're talking about Spring Stampede 1999. We asked the people which show they wanted to see, and they responded with a tied poll.
You undecisive bastards.
And shockingly, it was a tie between two of the good shows. Spring Stampede 2000 actually finished far back in third place, so kudos to our viewers for not voting for the worst.
Yeah, seriously, thank you. Thank you very, very much. I have lived through that era far too many times.
So instead, we had a deadlock between Spring Stampede 1994 and 1999. We flipped a coin. 1999 won. So that is our show today. Spring Stampede 1999, quite possibly the last good WCW pay-per-view. This is right as their company is really starting to fall apart. And I think on this show, you're seeing signs of what's wrong.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, this isn't an era of WCW I've watched a lot of. Obviously, I've watched all the 2000 stuff for the reviews because people want to read about really, really shitty shows. And I've watched all of, like, the main Attitude Era stuff. But coming to this, like, in-between era, it's really weird. Because you can see a company that's in transition, but at the same time, it seems like they're still trying to do the same crap they were doing in 1996. And it's kind of a mess creatively, but this show itself was like very good in a vacuum.
It's a tribute to how good their talent was, and they've over themselves too badly this time for one of the only times ever in WCW. It just kind of felt like we mostly had just straightforward finishes all through this show.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that. And I mean, mostly it's like either the cruiserweights or the guys who can really work who are getting matches, which is not what I remember from WCW shows.
No, that is definitely unusual. So to sort of set the stage of where we are at this point, Starrcade 1998 was where Kevin Nash ended a defeated streak after Scott Hall zapped Goldberg with a stun gun. So Nash won the WCW World Heavyweight Championship that night and ended Goldberg's undefeated streak. The next night on Nitro, Ric Flair won control of WCW after he beat Eric Bischoff in a match where Flair's career was on the line. And I would encourage Flair's promo from this show where he challenges Bischoff because it's an all-time classic as he strips off his clothes saying he'll put all of his in and starts talking about how much his suit and his belt and his shoes are worth. It's an all-time classic Flair promo.
That is pretty solid.
So with, Hogan out of the picture, Flair in charge of WCW, it looked like the NWO was finally vanquished, and that lasted one whole week of doom the next week. The main event of that Nitro was supposed to be Goldberg versus Nash in a rematch of Starrcade, but Goldberg was arrested and accused of aggravated stalking of Miss Elizabeth at the beginning of the night, at which point Hogan returned, took some time off for campaigning for President of the United States to challenge Nash to a match for the title, and Nash infamously laid down for Hogan, forming the new NWO, and there we had started.
Now, since we're right here in the finger poke of doom, and that's really like the biggest topic to talk about from this particular time period, let's just like lay it out and talk about it right now. Kevin Nash, who was booking the idea of himself beating Goldberg and the finger poke of doom and all that, he basically said the only way to get Goldberg back over after beating him was to give him a full and intact NWO to run through.
Yeah, oddly, that never happened.
Well, it's because he broke his goddamn arm on that limo window.
No, it's not. That was the next year. That was a different NWO he was chasing. That was the NWO with Jeff Jarrett.
No, yeah, you're totally right.
He actually went off to film a movie right after this, which was part of the problem. But they just never got around to him getting his revenge, and they were changing plans on the fly so much at this point that after he was gone for like a month making a movie, everything had changed.
Yeah. And so that wound up being obviously a complete disaster. But it begs the question, if the finger poke of doom does result in that, and then Goldberg spends 6 months running through him, gets back to Hogan, beats him, and is on top again, is it all justified?
it's still I'll still always have a problem with it because it doesn't make any logical sense to me that Nash in character would just lay down for Hogan and give up the title. The NWO isn't a cult. Like it's not the Wyatt family. Nash should still want to be champion, and I don't think bringing back the NWO at that point was a good idea. I think people were over it after 3 years, 2.5 years dominating things. They needed a break.
Yeah. Also, Kevin Nash can say that was his idea as much as he wants. Like, if you watch this show, they're all the baby faces. Like, the Wolfpack are 100% like the top baby faces presented on this show.
Yeah, and so Hogan attached himself to the cool brand, as he always does.
Yep.
So the next thing that happened, Flair booked himself in a world title match against Hogan for Super Brawl. He lost the match after his son David Flair turned on him. And notably, that show actually did huge business, like over 400,000 buys, which was kind of a shocking number. They actually beat St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which had the Austin Vince cage match in its main event that month. That was probably the last month where WCW outsold the WWF for pay-per-views. But the next month they went back to Hogan and Flair at Uncensored in the First Blood Steel Cage match, which Flair won on a screw job. He pinned Hogan after crooked referee Linson counted a pinfall on Hogan while Flair was bleeding. So Flair and Hogan essentially did a double turn at that point. Flair was clearly a heel. Hogan wasn't all the way there to being a babyface, but he was starting to get there. He was starting to be more and more Hulk Hogan at this point.
Which you have to remember, like, this is how many weeks after the finger poke of doom? Like, people weren't asking for babyface Hulk Hogan.
It's not a bad idea, but it's like 6 months too soon.
Yeah.
They just had not laid any of the foundation, but again, they were getting desperate, and they're just like, Hogan turning face, that'll pop business. And they were probably right that if it had been executed properly, it could have been huge. We would see that with Hogan's return to the WWF, but they did not lay any of the foundation for it. So Flair, coming into this show as the WCW champion, and despite being president of WCW, he's been booked into an impossible match. It's a four corners match for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Flair defeated Hogan, Sting, and DDP. And also Flair's old rival Randy Savage is the special guest referee of the match. I didn't hear any explanation on this show as to how this happened. I don't know. Flair really screwed himself booking himself in this match, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I believe Shivani says before the match starts that it was originally Flair Hogan, and then somehow the other two just got added in. By who?
Yeah.
Who's doing the booking if it's not the president?
As always, the problem with Pro Wrestling Authority figure storylines.
I mean, it's just so funny because this would happen again and again and again to anybody in an authority figure role in WCW. It really begs the question, why did everyone want to be president?
Yeah. Didn't turn out to be all it was cracked up to be. Also on the card, we've got Goldberg and Nash in the Starrcade rematch. So getting to the show, overall the show was received incredibly well at the time. I looked up the Wrestling Observer poll, and it was 93% thumbs up, 3% thumbs down, 4% thumbs in the middle. So just a unanimous critical success, but not necessarily a huge business success. It did 225,000 buys, which was down from 365,000 buys the previous year for Sting versus Savage for the title. So just showing kind of the year-over-year decline in their business is kind of staggering.
And I don't think it's a surprise that it was a critical success and not a business one. Because when you look up and down the card, there's not a lot of star power on this card in general, but there's a lot of great workers. So it's not a ton of the people who they had been leaning on to get buys in the first place. And it's a little bit weird in that case. It's kind of funny that we're going to talk about another kind of roster that had thinned out in star power next week. Because in this one, it really was like, why are you putting all of your good main eventers in the main event, and then there's no other stars to put anywhere?
Yeah, no, they definitely kind of overloaded the main event here. But getting into the show, the first thing I noticed was how much I loved the Stampede set. And just generally, WCW always had great pay-per-view names and themes and sets. Spring Stampede always had the Western theme, so like bales of hay and stagecoaches. I miss pay-per-views having unique sets. I really wish WWE would go back to this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It really differentiated them, and I mean, especially in like the thousands, WWE would be doing like wacky, way overpriced, ridiculous sets, and it was always a joy. That was like part of the fun is when you tuned in to be like, what the fuck is the set gonna look like this time? Oh, they hung 1,000 chairs from the rafters. Cool.
Yeah. So this was at the Tacoma Dome in Tacoma, Washington, which is kind of a small city to be doing a pay-per-view in, but that was something WCW did a lot, and they drew a big house here. It was sold out, and about 18,000 people in attendance, and this crowd looked massive. I think it may have just been the way the arena was set up, that it was just people straight up, but it was definitely a big house they drew in Tacoma.
Oh yeah, it almost looked like a Starcade crowd, just on a smaller scale. Like it was like people all the way up to the rafters.
Yeah. So opening match was between Blitzkrieg and Juventud Guerrera. I, at this time in 1999, was a huge fan of Blitzkrieg and thought this guy was going to be huge, but he ended up retiring from pro wrestling in 1999 to pursue a career as a computer technician, according to his Wikipedia page. This guy had a ton of talent. Like, this guy looked like he was going to be a huge star. He was only a couple years into the business, and he puts on an awesome match here with Juvi.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was kind of funny because there weren't a lot of new people who were added into the cruiserweight thing for a couple of years. It was just kind of like the same 15 guys who rotated in and out. So he was kind of like the first real fresh face in a while, and it really seemed like they were going to do something with him. So yeah, it was very surprising when nothing happened.
Yeah, so the stipulation here was that the winner would get a shot at the cruiserweight title the next night on Nitro. It's kind of just a typical cruiserweight match, but with just some really, really great spots, some really high impact stuff. Blitzkrieg, first big spot is him coming off the top rope, going for Juvi on the floor, but Juvi just spikes him with a perfect drop kick as he's coming down.
Yeah, and you can tell it's a really good spot if the announcers actually pop for it, because most of the matches, they don't really give a shit about what the cruiserweights are doing. And that one, like, Heenan spends like the next 5 minutes talking about.
Definitely. And then Blitzkrieg pulls off this insane Asai moonsault where he jumps from the ring, springboards up to the top rope, turns around, and moonsaults to the floor.
Yeah, that was insane. I mean, that's the kind of it's basically like a Sabu spot, but like Sabu never actually did it this well.
No, it does help that WCW didn't use ropes. They used steel cables, so those are a lot easier to balance on, but it's still a remarkable feat to pull that off.
That's actually a fascinating thing to point out too, because this era of WCW is where all of this like springboard shit that we do have now in the wrestling industry comes from. But the guys now, like, it's a way higher degree of difficulty than it used to be, which is why they do it over in the corner where the ropes are much harder and like have less give to them. Because if you do a springboard in the middle of a WWE ring, like, you don't know what the hell you're gonna get.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch like WWF shows from the 80s where they'll do the spot where like Andre the Giant gets stuck and bend that way anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
There were a few spots here where they like would sort of botch things, but they were so athletic that they would recover in midair and make it look okay. Like there's some kind of botched reverse, like Juvi goes for a reverse suplex, and like Blitzkrieg is supposed to grab him and DDT him, but he misses. But they kind of just shift in midair to make it look like he sort of hit it. It's just kind of amazing. Blitzkrieg misses his Phoenix Splash, which I believe was his finisher. There's a botched Frankensteiner from the top rope that again kind of looks okay because they just managed to make it land. And then Juvi finishes the match with just the sickest super Juvi driver I've ever seen.
Holy
just
shit.
Spikes him right on his head for the 1, 2, 3. Seemed like he protected him, but this looked nasty.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like the right kind of nasty. Like, if he wasn't hurt by this, then that's like a real testament to Hoovy, because holy shit, this looked dangerous in a good way. I will say, like, I have always been a gigantic fan of Juventud Guerrera. He just, of all of the cruiserweights, he seems like the most like frenetic and like highest energy. Like, he just never ran out of, pardon the pun, juice.
He had a lot of personality, and I think he actually benefited from losing his mask. He was one of the only cruiserweights who I think did, because
Yes.
he did a great job showing he's selling with his face.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, we're going to see Rey Mysterio later on, who obviously does
That was a
not benefit.
colossal mistake.
Yeah. But yeah, Hoovy, I mean, he looks great. This is great. Like, in the ring, he's fantastic. I found myself like thinking, like, it's not just the Rey Mysterios and the Billy Kidmans who suffer from the cruiserweight stigma later on. Like, a guy like Hoovy, as good as he was at this point, like, he should have been pushed further than this.
Yeah, he was a guy who I was expecting more to come of from him, but just it seemed like he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way backstage.
Everybody, go to your Google machines, as they would say on a different show, and look up the Juicy Juicy Juice promo and find out exactly how bad Juventud Guerrera rubbed people the wrong way.
So the next match was a match I wasn't expecting to see on a WCW card. It was a hardcore hack who was the Sandman and Bam Bam Bigelow. Always forget that Sandman was in WCW. It didn't last very long.
Yeah, this is right around the time where like everybody from ECW like took a tour of WCW and then wound up coming back. It was actually super weird, because like Mikey Whipwreck is in the next match after this, and it's
Another
like
guy I forgot was in WCW.
exactly. It's like everybody took like their 6-month turn and then just came right back home.
Got some actual paychecks and could go back and do the Passion Project after that.
Exactly. Though it's worth saying, like, Hack looks like he's in great shape here for him.
Yeah. I mean, it was the same thing when he went to WWE in the 2000s. He suddenly stopped drinking beer, apparently.
Yeah, it's funny what actual paychecks will do for you.
Yeah, but I thought this match was really good, and it really stood out because WCW didn't do a whole lot of hardcore matches.
Yeah, it's actually one of those things where like they do so much that it kind of makes the other matches look like shit by comparison, because they're like, this is like 2000s TLC matches levels of like doing shit, and like you never saw matches like this, not even in like WWE's hardcore division at the time. Like they're doing everything.
There's so many spots in this match. So they start fighting out in the aisle. Hack sets up a table, puts Bigelow on it, goes up on a stagecoach that's part of the set, and jumps off of it with a swanton bomb through the table. So we've got a 250-pound guy doing the Jeff Hardy spot.
Yeah,
and that's like 2 minutes into the match.
And it looks super dangerous because the stagecoach is like wobbling back and forth, and
yeah,
he just
doesn't
like
have much of a suspension system.
It doesn't matter. Picture perfect swanton.
And then 10 seconds later, Bam Bam is up and like in control of the match.
And it was so funny because listening to the announcers freak out about that. And like usually the announcers are my least favorite part of WCW shows because they're just kind of corny and Zabisco's terrible and it's kind of all over the place. I love them on this show because for some reason, like Shivani was just on his game this time. So he's just like, wait a minute. What the hell is Bigelow doing back up? He just got swanton.
You can hear like the disdain in Tony Schiavone's voice when guys don't sell because he's just like, well, that doesn't make any sense. How is he standing after that? But yeah, they fight back to the ring. There's lots of weapon shots. Hack sets up a table wedged between the apron and the guardrail. Schiavone says something stupid on commentary about how the trash cans don't hurt, like sound really bad, but they don't actually hurt that much.
Which, I mean, why would you say that? Like,
I have no idea. And like,
that's obviously true, but why?
They both jump on him right away for like, what are you talking about? You want to get hit with one?
Oh my goodness. And then they just rag on him the rest of the match for that too. Just like every time somebody gets hit with that trash can, they're just like, what do you think of it now, Shivani?
Dumbass. And then Hack puts a ladder on top of Bigelow and does a swanton onto it, which is an insane spot that clearly hurts him more than it did Bigelow.
He does 3 different swantons in this. Only one of them hits Bigelow at all. and all of them hurt him.
Sandman brings a table and a guardrail into the ring, grabs a ladder, gets pushed off of it, and crashes through that table that was wedged between the ring and the guardrail. And no, we're not even close to the finish yet.
I will say, I hated that spot because he clearly puts himself through the table in a way that's more obvious than anything I've ever seen in my life. Like, he climbs onto the ladder, he's looking at the table, he just grabs Bigelow's hand, and then he just throws himself off the ladder. Like, come on, man. You got to wait for Bigelow to pull you.
Yeah, common problem in hardcore wrestling where you just have obviously cooperative spots. Next, Bigelow leans the guardrail, the ladder in the other, slams Hack into the ladder. Hack puts Bigelow on the guardrail and tries a leg drop and misses it and hits the guardrail, which is an insane spot. Easy to break your leg, easy to get your knee wrenched in that thing. It's a guardrail like a bike rack, not like the security walls that WWE used in this time.
And it's funny because in our review of Barely Legal,
same
Hack
spot.
does the same fucking spot in the same way, and it looks ugly both times.
So at this point, Hack's valet Chastity brings a fire extinguisher into the ring, spends about 5 minutes getting it ready so Bigelow can get it away from her and spray her with it. And then Sandman hits Bigelow with the Singapore cane and the Russian leg sweep onto the guardrail, which again just seems like it would really hurt. And then to finish the match, Bigelow hits Sandman with a Death Valley driver off the top rope through a table.
I mean,
they went all out on this one.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's funny that anything on this show had to try to follow this because, like, they do more spots in this match than the entire rest of the show does combined.
Yeah. This may have been part of why Sandman didn't last in WCW. I can imagine some of the guys in the back not being so happy with this match.
It is interesting to me, though, remembering Bam Bam Bigelow's, like, hardcore revival of his career, because I never think of him that way. But I guess, like, the most successful point of his career is going to be him getting hit with fucking cookie sheets.
Well, yeah, when he wasn't main eventing WrestleMania against a football player, this is probably number 2.
Yeah, that was my favorite WrestleMania, by the way. We'll get to that some other time. My favorite
Someday.
WrestleMania match, yeah.
Next up, we've got Mikey Whipwreck against Scotty Riggs in a match straight off WCW Saturday Night. WCW had this odd habit of just putting random matches no one wanted to see on their pay-per-views.
It was actually super funny because, like, what a sick burn. Like, Shivani literally says, like, well, this match wasn't scheduled, but I guess they're throwing it out here. What a way to shit on him.
This just sucks. Scotty Riggs had been in Raven's Flock. Before that, he was in the American Males, and everybody hated the American Males. Him and Buff Bagwell were somehow supposed to be a face team. They were like the least likable two faces anybody had ever seen. Now his gimmick, he's back to being a heel. He's got kind of like a Rick Rude, Lex Luger narcissist gimmick that he gets better looking every single day. And Mikey Whipwreck is Mikey Whipwreck. And I guess the baby face here, although neither of these guys is over at all.
No, I mean, it's silent. And in fact, I do want to point out at this point that while they do have a jam-packed crowd, and they're not silent, but they are like very on the low end of a crowd as far as noise. Like, they don't seem into anything on this show. They just seem kind of generally happy to be there. But like, they don't seem into anyone. Does that make sense?
That's fair. The only guy Savage got a really big pop, and that was about it. Although the thing is, with WCW shows, when you watch them on the network, there's weird editing issues. They've dubbed over a lot of the themes, and I think sometimes that affects the audio tracks behind it. So I think sometimes you can't hear the crowd because of that. Like, you can't hear the ring announcer on a lot of the entrances where they've obviously dubbed over the theme music. So sometimes I think that is an issue, but generally, yeah, it didn't seem like the crowd was very hot tonight.
Yeah, even if they're into them coming out, they definitely aren't into them while they're wrestling. Like, that's going to be a much bigger problem in, like, the next couple matches where, like, the crowd just sits on their hands.
Pretty much the only big spot here was Whipwreck getting knocked off the apron and his head very clearly hitting the guardrail directly. Not a smart bump. Riggs got some heat. There was a very loud, boring chant.
Yeah, there was. And like I kind of like Scotty. So I like Scotty Riggs as a guy, but yeah, his work.
He won. His push went nowhere.
And it's funny because they even mentioned, like, I don't know why they would want to keep referencing that he was in the flock when it's 100% different of a character. So they're literally just like the announcers are sitting there like, huh, well, this guy was in the flock and now I guess he's thinks he's pretty. Like, start. They don't sell anything happening on the show.
Yeah, it's just WCW was not good at. They were never very good at the overall story narrative. The WWF just understood how to tell stories in wrestling better than WCW did. There's nobody cared about this match. Nobody was giving the announcers any stage direction on how to put this match over, whereas any match on a WWF pay-per-view in the announcer's ear telling them, how to sell the match and what the story was.
Right.
So the next match was Conan against the Disco Inferno. I'll say I'm a big mark for Disco, and I did enjoy this match. These guys are not classical technicians, but they're both guys who were really over with their characters and could get a really strong reaction out of the crowd, particularly Disco, because there is no one more hateable than Disco Inferno.
And yeah, I'll actually kind of take it back that no one was into anybody on the show because the crowd loved Conan.
Conan was the road dog of WCW.
Well, like his catchphrases, I don't even necessarily know what they were because he rattles them off so fast here, and yet the crowd is still right there with him the whole time.
We're going to get bowdy, bowdy, rowdy, rowdy, ooh la la, arriba la raza. Yeah, I mean, it's just the cadence is so good.
Yeah, and like literally, like, yeah, on every beat, the crowd is right there with like, bowdy, raza.
Yeah. It's a very kind of basic match. Lots of chin locks from Disco. Conan makes his comeback, hits all his signature stuff, and steals Disco's last dance finisher, which was the Stone Cold Stunner, and gets the win. Huge pop for Conan winning here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I don't think there was really anything on the line here. Like, they had like a storyline, but I literally glazed over when
they had a video package recapping. There was something about a music video. I don't know. Yeah, not really important. Two strong personalities in a fun mid-card match. The next match was for the Cruiserweight title. It was Rey Mysterio, defending champion, against Billy Kidman. And they were also the tag team champions at this point, but facing off here for the Cruiserweight title. Mysterio does not have the mask here. He had lost that to Kevin Nash, I think a month or so before this match. Rey Mysterio does not look right without his mask.
No, he looks horrible.
It reveals just how tiny and childlike he is.
Yeah, he looks tiny. I mean, the rest of his outfit, he looks great. Like, it's a good rebranding, and you can kind of see where the Rey Mysterio character goes in WWE after this. But, like, no, it's not working. He doesn't look good. And I'll be honest with you. Yeah, go ahead.
Surprising lack of heat for this match. Going back to our issue about the crowd, but they were not into this match at all.
And I hated this match. Like, I literally hated it. Like, there were like 5 points during the match where I wanted to fast forward, but I didn't because I was taking notes on it. But like, I genuinely hated it.
It's a long 15-minute match, and about 2 or 3 minutes in, the match gets screwed up because Mysterio goes for a head scissor out on the floor and just very clearly bangs his head on the ring steps, which was not supposed to happen. And you can tell he's kind of knocked woozy from it. He's got a big fucking knot on his head as soon as he gets up.
Yeah. And then, like, that's not the first or last time in this match that they hurt themselves doing spots. It happens like 3 or 4 times. Yeah. It's like, it's not that they're sloppy per se, that just everything just feels a little off.
Kidman appeared to hurt his knee when he hit a shooting star press off the apron onto the floor, got up holding the knee and stretching it out, and it didn't match at all. So I think that was probably just a legitimate injury there. And yeah, it's just a match with kind of no transitions and just spot. The spots are really good and they execute them really well. But yeah, there's no real story or flow to the match.
I wrote in my notes that it was literally like they took like a 6-minute Nitro match and stretched it into 15, and in between all they did was headlocks. Like there was no reason
right.
for it to be long. They didn't add anything new to it. They just did the same shit except in 15 minutes instead of 6.
Yeah, so not a bad match in my opinion, but didn't hit nearly the heights I was expecting it to, especially with the amount of time they gave it. Mysterio won with a Frankensteiner off the top rope.
Which I did think was cool because that was like his original finisher. So like none of his other finishers worked, so we went back to the original one. I see what they were trying to do. It just didn't work for me.
Yeah. Next match I thought was a strong rebound though. Tag team match, Raven and Saturn against Benoit and Malenko. Benoit and Malenko, after having both been faces for a while, were now heels because they are in the Horsemen and Flair's henchmen. They're managed by Arn Anderson, who gets a ton of heat here just for existing, it seems.
Yeah, and it was pretty great. It's nice. It was nice to see Arn Anderson looking so great too, because like this is kind of the end of when he's going to be able to do anything physically at all. But yeah, like, and I think Benoit and Malenko are obviously kind of better heels. Like they look immediately hateable if you don't know anything about either guy. It's just kind of a shame that the Horsemen never really worked out in this kind of later WCW. Like they were continually kind of a presence on the show, but I never felt like they had a real 4 horsemen.
For about a decade straight, it felt like the storyline was the 4 horsemen are screwed up and we're trying to fix things.
Yeah. Or
it's
like we're looking
give them Jeff Jarrett, give them Kurt Hennig. Yeah, can't find the 4th guy.
And yeah, I wonder often if there ever could have been like a perfect 4 horsemen, because I never felt they always kind of were doing it. I never felt like we really got the 4 horsemen versus NWO for all the marbles kind of thing, you know?
No, they when the NWO first formed, both Arn and Flair had injury problems and had to take time off, and Anderson ended up retiring, and Flair was gone for months. And then they came back and they did Horsemen against NWO B Team, but it ended with Hennig turning on the Horsemen and Flair basically getting murdered in Winston-Salem, which he contends killed the Carolinas for WCW after that. And he might not be wrong. I think there were only so many times they could have Flair get his ass kicked in North Carolina before the crowd just gave up. But yeah, they never did the full-on Horsemen versus NWO feud. It just never really happened.
Yeah, it's kind of a missed opportunity, but again, they never had a 4 horsemen that could have gone up against the NWO. You know,
I mean, Mongo, Benoit, and Malenko against the NWO is not going to work out well for them.
No, not at all.
So Saturn is wearing a skirt here. I think that's the result of a match he lost to Chris Jericho.
Yeah, where he wanted to wear the dress, so he asked to lose.
A dress gimmick gets guys over. Same thing happened with Vito on SmackDown when they had him doing that.
Yeah, which is so funny because that Vito gimmick happened in the middle of a very homophobic time in WWE, where like there's just all sorts of like anti-gay sentiment and all that stuff. And then in the middle of that is a guy liberally cross-dressing, having a great time, and everyone fucking loved it.
He got really over, and apparently Vince even considered putting the title on him for a minute.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. But here, Raven and Saturn were super over as baby faces. And I didn't even remember Raven being a face here, but he was really, might have just been because they were up in the Northwest in the Seattle area and he's got a grunge gimmick. But yeah, crowd was really into Raven. Maybe it's just they hated him for so long that it was cool to finally be able to cheer him.
I think it was probably something like that because the video package seemed to indicate that he had just recently been that way. And he probably didn't stay that way for very long. But yeah, and again, it's one of those things where like there were multiple periods in WCW where Raven was one of the most over people on the show one way or the other. And it didn't matter. They never did anything with him.
No. So I really liked this match. It's kind of a classic old school tag match. It was fun to see. Malenko and Benoit made a great tag team. They really reminded me of the Midnight Express here, the way they were working. They got heat on Raven. The crowd got really mad whenever Malenko and Benoit would cheat, which I always appreciate. Like in a crowd that's indignant when the heels cheat always entertains me.
Oh yeah.
A hot tag to Saturn. He's hitting suplexes. He gets a giant pop when he puts Benoit's head under his skirt for a 10 punch, which is a great spot. Raven and Saturn hit the Doomsday Device on Malenko. Death Valley Driver on Malenko is broken up by Benoit. And then Malenko and Benoit do an awesome German suplex dropkick combo that I'd never seen before. And they just hit it perfect.
Yeah, it's actually one of those things that I've seen in like SmackDown games. And I was like, I wonder whoever did that move. And here it is. This is who did that move.
Yeah. Then Malenko hits Saturn with just a sick 10 out of 10 Tiger Bomb and locks him in the Texas Cloverleaf. Saturn gets to the ropes. Saturn hits the Death Valley Driver on Malenko, but Benoit breaks up the pin with the diving headbutt. Another kind of perfect timing where he hit it right as the hand was coming down for 3 to break up the pin. Hot tag to Saturn. Hot tag to Raven, rather. Saturn goes for a splash from the top rope to the floor on Malenko, but Arn Anderson pulls Malenko off and Saturn goes through the table. Raven hits Malenko with the even flow DDT. Anderson gets in the ring. As the referee's putting him out, he drops a chair on Raven's head, and in a spot that really made me cringe, Benoit hits the diving headbutt onto the chair, onto Raven. Just stupid spot, and hard thing to watch knowing how his life ended.
Yeah, it really... I mean, it's already hard watching Benoit matches, especially ones where you have to cheer him, which luckily this isn't one of those. But man, anytime you see him take a shot to the head, it's just like, fuck. All right. Yeah, that's, yeah.
Yeah. Benoit comes up from this, like, legitimately split open and bleeding everywhere. The edge of the chair clearly got him above the eye, but Malenko and Benoit win. Awesome match. Wish it had been for the tag titles. They showed in the video package that Raven had cost Malenko and Benoit the titles to Mysterio and Kidman before this show. This would have been more fun if it had been for the belts, but a really good match either way.
I feel like there's kind of like a running thing on the shows that we do on this podcast where like title belts get hot-shotted literally the week before the pay-per-view that we watch.
It happened a lot in the 90s.
I mean, holy shit. Settle down.
Yeah. Next match, finals of the United States Championship Tournament, Scott Steiner versus Booker T. Flair stripped Scott Hall of the United States title because he hadn't been defending it. He had a foot injury and I assume some personal issues because it's Scott Hall in the late 90s.
Now, is this the period where they were explicitly told not to talk about Scott Hall on television, and that's why Kevin Nash is just doing all of Scott Hall's gimmick for him?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is not that long after they made Scott Hall's alcoholism part of the storyline and like had him be drunk on air.
Great. Real tasteful. Yeah. Good job.
So Booker is the TV champion. He won that title from Steiner the previous month at Uncensored. Scott Steiner is like at the height of his ticking time bomb persona here. He's just like getting into fans' faces, motherfucking them, like spends 5 minutes going around the ring arguing with fans before this match.
It's really kind of genius because he's probably the most over heel on this show. He's probably the truest heel on this show too.
Yeah, and I love this Scott Steiner persona. Like, I love Big Papa Pump, the big bad booty daddy. I love the posing, the push-ups. He is such a hateable heel.
And the genius of it, and this is the part that kind of gets lost when we remember the gimmick, is he never really won matches clean. Like, he, despite his body and like all of the talking and everything like that, like he was a chicken shit heel at his heart. And like that was kind of a fantastic way to do it.
So a big part of this match is Steiner keeps doing things that should get him disqualified, but the referee is too afraid of him to disqualify him. Like, he kicks Booker in the nuts right in front of the ref, and he just kind of glowers at the referee when he thinks of disqualifying him.
he like actively shoves the ref like twice, and the ref is just like, well, all right.
I'm just like, well, I wouldn't disqualify Scott Steiner.
Yeah, because they're literally like, well, if he disqualifies him, he'll be going to the fucking hospital after this. Like, that's fair.
Booker makes a comeback. He hits the axe kick, flapjack, Harlem side kick, but the referee's down. Booker goes to the top rope, gets crotched, and Scott hits him with the Frankensteiner, which he did not do often in this era, but hits it perfect here, and then grabs the referee's hand to count the 3 count, but Booker actually kicks out at 2 from the cheating pinfall. But as Booker goes for a suplex, Steiner pulls a foreign object out of his trunks and very weakly hits him with it and pins him.
Yeah,
not good execution on the finish, but I pretty much enjoyed this match other than that.
Oh, I enjoyed it a lot. And Booker T from this era, like, I've often said the biggest missed opportunity in WCW is Booker T. Because Booker T should have been a giant star. Like, he should have been the guy that they were feeding these NWO guys to at the end, and they just ran out of time to actually do it.
He would have been a good choice to break Goldberg's undefeated streak.
Yeah, just something like that. He was like the one guy who the fans believed in, and you could tell. Like, they were always into Booker T. And
have you ever heard Sullivan's idea where he wanted him to beat Hogan for the world title in Atlanta on Martin Luther King Day and have Coretta Scott King like present him with the title after he won it?
I mean, that would have been cool. It may have been a little much and a little exploitative, but like, hey, it's something.
The sentiment would have been nice.
But and I mean, WCW can rightfully say that they crowned the first Black World Champion. So I mean,
yeah,
go with that.
So following in that legacy, and they can, and like that's the kind of thing they could get covered on CNN and stuff because they were both owned by Turner.
Hell yes, absolutely. And in fact, it's amazing. I mean, like, that's the kind of company that Turner was, is that they really prized diversity. It's amazing they didn't force them to push Booker T before they actually did.
Well, because what forced them to do when they finally sued for racial discrimination.
Yeah. It's just funny because
it's a shame Booker had to get the title under those circumstances because he actually did deserve it, but he kind of immediately got branded like they did this because of the lawsuit, and it probably did play a factor because he hadn't been doing shit before that.
Right. It's just that when you look at this era, like when you look at Booker T, he looks like a star.
Yeah, he's like he looks like 6'5", in great shape, amazing athlete, can really work, can talk. Like his push just stalled out after he did the TV title thing with Benoit. He got hurt, and then when he came back, this is kind of it for him. After this, he's doing GI Bro and losing to Ahmed Johnson in a match for the right to the letter T. Yep, that's the thing that happened. A really fat version of Ahmed Johnson, too.
Ahmed Johnson.
Next up, we've got our sub-main event. It's Goldberg against Kevin Nash in the Starrcade rematch. Crowd was buzzing for this one. Nash comes out to, I felt like, a bigger pop than Goldberg here.
For sure.
Didn't feel like Goldberg got much of any reaction at all, actually.
I think, like, whenever we talk about it now, it's easy to see that Goldberg losing destroyed him.
Oh, they really killed him. And then, like, having him get the shit kicked out of him by the NWO the next night, too. Goldberg can't sell. Like, he can't do it. It only works when he's destroying people. Yeah. And it is a long-term problem, but you just have to ride it while you can.
And so maybe they could have fixed it had they altered him in some way, had he been changed by that experience. But he's coming out like exactly the same unbeatable destroyer here. And so it's just kind of the same old shit. And like, I wasn't even watching at the time, and it still felt that way to me. Meanwhile, Kevin Nash comes out. I forgot how fucking cool Kevin Nash was at this era. Man, that guy looks cool.
Yeah. And crowd pops huge for him. He does, after the bell rings, he gets on the mic to do the hey yo, and the crowd is just crazy behind him. And then he proceeds to kick the shit out of Goldberg for most of this match.
Yes, he beats his fucking ass.
Zero offense from Goldberg for 5 minutes of this 6-minute match.
And considering the fact that at Starrcade it was mostly Goldberg kicking Nash's ass and then he wins as a fluke, for this to be the return match and Goldberg to get his ass kicked, it's just exacerbating the problem.
Yeah, it's Kevin Nash was a smooth operator, and he knew, I gotta say, felt like here he was trying to fuck Goldberg.
Yeah. In fact, the most memorable spot from this match is not anything that Goldberg does. It is Kevin Nash 7-foot leapfrogging the spear.
Yeah, that was amazing. I'd seen him do that when he was younger than this. This is probably the last time he ever did it.
Yeah, but like he comes off of this match looking incredible, even though he loses clean, and Goldberg comes off looking like a piece of shit.
Yeah. I mean, I was glad they didn't try to go more than 6 minutes with this. They didn't have any more than that in them.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of exactly what you pictured in your head, is Nash just kind of knees him in the corner for 5 minutes, and then spear, jackhammer, that's it.
Yeah. I wouldn't have tried to do much more than this. Didn't have a big problem with it. I just think it was emblematic of how Goldberg had lost all of his luster at this point.
Very much agree.
So it's main event time. It's the Four Corners match for the WCW Heavyweight Championship of the World. Ric Flair, the defending champion, against Hollywood Hogan, Sting, and Diamond Dallas Page. One fall to a finish. Macho Man Randy Savage is the special guest referee. Whew, really packing him in here.
Yeah, and I'm glad you told me what the backstory was, where Flair is the heel and Hogan's kind of a babyface, because I could not figure out for the life of me who I was supposed to be cheering for in this match.
Well, Sting is pretty much a pure babyface, and DDP is, but he turns heel like the next night.
Yeah, he's not acting like one.
No, not really. And it did seem like there was some boos for him, which is odd because him winning the belt here, for me at least, was a really feel-good moment, because it was just like this guy worked so hard and got over, and it was so cool to see somebody new get the belt, but they kind of squandered that goodwill immediately.
And this match was not at all designed to put over DDP. Like,
no.
if the win was designed to be like, hey, good job, Dallas, you deserve it, the match was literally about everyone but him. Like, first you get the bit where it's all Hogan and Flair, and then Hogan gets carted off with his leg. Yeah. Then you get the bit
DDP hurts him too. I thought it was Flair, but it's DDP who takes him out with the figure four around the ring post.
Which looked great. And then when Sting comes over and he's like wrenching on the arm to make it worse for Hogan, that was beautiful.
Yeah, and didn't feel like Hogan really got any sympathy for that. Fans just weren't there yet with Hogan.
In fact, while they're dragging him off, you could hear literally like somebody right next to Hogan's ear yell, "Retire, you old bastard!"
And they really try to be like, "Oh, let's use our serious voices. This is a really serious situation." And like Bischoff comes out and is like, "Get the camera out of here!" And yeah, going for the worked shoot and didn't really pull it off.
Yeah, and then they do a thing where it's all DDP and Flair going against Sting. So Sting's clearly our babyface. And, like, eventually it gets to the point where when DDP wins, it's kind of out of nowhere. Like, wait, really?
So, yeah, he wins after Flair puts the figure four on Sting. And then Savage, kind of out of nowhere, hits Flair with the flying elbow drop, which they hadn't been feuding, when Savage went away, but that's an old rivalry. They don't reference it, but in the storylines, Flair stole Elizabeth from Savage. So understandable that there's still a beef there, but Savage takes out Flair with the flying elbow, and then DDP hits the diamond cutter on Flair. He gets the 1-2-3, and the crowd is shocked. You can kind of see them just waiting for the screw job that never comes here.
Oh yeah, I meant actually to mention that in the Scott Steiner Booker T match. On this show, every single time a ref bump happens, the entire crowd stands up and looks at the entryway. Because they are waiting for the run-in, because that's how they've been trained to accept any kind of ref bump. It's time for the NWO.
Every WCW main event for years was a screw job. So when they didn't do one, that was the shock. That was the swerve.
What a fucking company. But, like, yeah, this isn't a horrible match by any stretch of the imagination. They kind of do their best with the very limited, like, and weird characters that they have to work with in here. But the ending, yeah, it just doesn't come off right. And even like, there's a point where like Flair gets up from Savage's elbow and just kind of walking around, and he's not like, he doesn't look mad. He's not like, oh, fucking Randy, you double crossed me, you son of a bitch. He's just like, huh, what now, what?
Yeah, I don't think anybody but Paige gave a fuck here.
Yeah, I mean, Sting was just kind of being Sting, being there.
Yeah, Sting, happy as long as the check gets there. Hogan's getting his massive pay-per-view check. He worked his 5-minute match, and now he's gone for another couple months, keeping that presidential campaign going.
Yeah, it's a real shame. And it's just very odd that it's Paige that they put the belt on here, especially since they know that what they're going for is Goldberg running through everybody to get to the champion.
I think that had pretty much been dropped at this point.
How?
I mean, the NWO was dead at this point until they brought it back again in the fall. But by this point, Hall is gone. Like, Nash is kind of doing his own thing. Hogan's gone for a while. Savage is back, but he's not part of it. Like, it's just they've shifted course. Now it's Flair as the top heel. So the fallout from this, DDP was champion. He lost the belt and won it back on an episode of Nitro about 2 weeks after this. He turned heel like immediately after this, which I thought was really stupid, because can we just have a babyface champion for a little while? Can we let the fans feel good about something for a little while for a change? He lost the title to Sting like in the opening match on Nitro, and then won it back in the main event in a 4-way, but then he lost the title to Nash at Slamboree in May. And again, we're right back where we started. Nash is the champion.
It's actually super funny to me that you say that about, like, can we just have a babyface champion for a minute? Because I feel like when we did our review of Backlash, we said the same thing about a heel. Like, WWE and WCW were either a babyface company or a heel company. There always had to be one of those on top.
Yeah.
Maybe the right answer is neither one of those fucking answers.
Yeah, sometimes it can be one and sometimes it can be the other. But yeah, I think that was part of what helped WWF's business, was that it was a babyface territory and the good guy always won. The heel would get heat on him at points, but Hogan would always win. Austin would always win. The fans would get to go home happy. Where Crockett and then in WCW, it felt like 9 times out of 10 the heels won.
Yeah, and I mean, the highs will be higher, because when the babyface finally wins against that dominant heel, it's better, right? I mean, it just obviously is. And business will spike when they're in the hunt like that, and you got a good babyface coming after them. But you won't ever send the fans home happy. So long term, the business will always be better for a babyface first.
Yeah, and it's just WCW went too far with the NWO always won. Hogan always won. And I think that was the problem with the finger poke of doom, was it seemed like Goldberg had finally vanquished the NWO. And it's just like, no, these fuckers are back. Like, they beat Sting. They beat Goldberg. There's no one who can beat them now.
Yep. So at the end of the day, the NWO beat WCW and promptly disintegrated, so nobody won.
Yeah, and then they brought them back a couple more times without any. Again, it's just amazing that they never just did the one definitive WCW versus NWO show, the final battle,
yes,
winner take all. Like, that's going to do big business, and they always were like, we can get a little more out of it. It's got more life in it. But even when they split them up into the NWO and the Wolfpack, they never really had them fight each other.
I do wonder if it was always their idea to do that show and then maybe to have the NWO win, but then they were scared off by Sold Out and how shitty it did.
Probably. So, that may have, I mean, there was always talk rumbling about Bischoff wanting to have an NWO show, but like every time they tried to do something like that, it did horribly. The Nitro where the NWO took over did horrible ratings, and Sold Out did a terrible buy rate, so it became clear there was no appetite for that.
Yeah, it's just it's very unfortunate that we never got that, because fuck, what a great pay-per-view that would have been.
Yeah, it was the missed opportunity. There were a bunch of points where they could have just had if Starrcade '97 had just been the end, and they had moved on to new things after that. I think maybe the company would still be alive today, but it's not.
Nope, it is dead.
Yeah. So I thought that was a fun show, a good show, and an interesting look at kind of how maybe how they could have survived with how there was still value in this brand, how they still had a ton of talent, but it just turned out they were so lost in the woods they couldn't pull out of their downward spiral.
Yeah. I mean, this show tells you everything you need to know. The talent was fantastic. The fans cared about some of the characters, but the booking just got in the way. And that's literally the story of WCW. Like, they had all the elements, they just didn't have a direction.
Absolutely. And next week, we're going to take a look at another show where they didn't have the right direction. It's Judgment Day 2004. Kyush, what have we got for the guys next week?
Holy crap, you guys. If you want to hear about some absolute garbage bullshit, you are in for a goddamn treat. Not only do we have the debut of goddamn Mordecai, not only do we have Rico Constantino, not only do we have Jackie versus Chavo for the Cruiserweight title, not only do we have destroyed pushes for Booker T, Eddie Guerrero, everyone that you love, everything that means anything to you. But we also got a pretty good opening match.
Yeah, that was good.
Holy crap, this show sucks so much.
Yeah, for those of you who like to hear us rant and rave about terrible wrestling, next week is for you.
Oh, boy. Oh, my goodness.
All that plus Rene Dupree's massive erection.
Oh, the boner watch.
So that's next week, Judgment Day 2004. Got anything coming up on the blog?
We're still working on some scouting reports. Actually, after the NXT scouting report is over, we're going to be moving on, and we're going to be doing an Impact scouting report, which is by far our most requested thing to do on the blog, which is going to be a lot of fun. And I think I'm just going to be working on that for the next couple of weeks.
Sounds good. So, yeah, we'll be back next week with Judgment Day 2004. It will be a can't-miss episode. I promise it will be more entertaining than the actual show was.
Do you think Rene Dupree calls his boner the French tickler?
That's a pretty good name for it.
Thank you for humoring me.
All that and more next week on the Lawcast. Thanks, everybody. Hope to see you again next week.